So tell us what's been on your mind.
I don't know how many people who are familiar with my work know this about me, but I am an immigrant to the United States. I came to the US on an F1 student visa. So some of the things we're seeing playing out in the US today feel really scary because I was once, in the position of people who are now being rounded up and deported for exercising their First Amendment rights. But I was born and raised in the United Arab Emirates in Dubai. My parents were Indian immigrants who moved to Dubai in 1969, 1 year before the country became an official country. It was formerly known as the Trucial States, it was a former British colony, and it became a country in 1970. And although my parents were already living there at the time it became a country, they were not allowed to be citizens. And they lived there for 51 years until they moved here to the United States to be with me. And in those 51 years, they worked, they, just really did their best. They contributed to the economy and they were not allowed to become citizens. I was born there, as were my two sisters, born immigrants, born with Indian passports because that's what our
Mm.
parents. And as I have been looking at what Donald Trump has been doing in the United States and the entire Trump administration, it has been occurring to me that the country that I left precisely because there were no freedoms, that, because it is a monarchy, that country is becoming an maybe inadvertent or maybe not model for what Trump wants to create in the United States. So the UAE is built on immigrant labor, just as much of the US is. One big difference is that immigrants far outnumber citizens. And that's by design. It's built on immigrant labor. And the government has understood that if they were to give immigrants citizenship, if they were born there or after having lived there or had some pathway, ethnic Arabs, Emiratis as they're called, would be entirely outnumbered. And so they define citizenship ethnically, religiously, geographically, and not by virtue of residing there or contributing to the economy. And that's what Donald Trump, I'm very kind of scared to see this, wants to do. And here's why. There's several things that are hallmarks of living in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. On the surface, everything looks very lovely, liberal. Women can drive, you can go to the beach, you can wear bathing suits, you can buy alcohol in bars. They have bars, they have restaurants. It's very nice nightlife, a lot of shopping. It's a very, very commercial country,
Mhm.
huge billboards. It's like Vegas for Arabs. However, there are secret police everywhere. And I grew up being told by my friends, by my elders, by my parents, don't say anything that could get you deported. Don't say anything that could get you deported is a mantra that I heard my entire childhood growing up.
And just as a point of curiosity, so if you were to have been deported from the country of your birth, which is UAE, uh, you would have been deported where? To India?
To India,
Yeah.
because that's the citizenship that I had,
Well, although
not the
you've never
past.
been there.
I mean, I visited often. I never lived
Right.
there, right? Like,
Never
so
lived there.
it
Yeah.
all the time. It's like 2.5 hours flight from Dubai, between Dubai and Bombay, where my parents are from. My parents were born there, but I wasn't. My sisters and I weren't. So we visited routinely, but we'd never lived there. But yeah, they would the you would be deported to the country that is on your passport, and the mukhabarat, as they're called, the secret police. They were basically, I don't even know if they were everywhere, but there were just enough rumors. There were just enough stories of people being carted off because they were sitting at a cafe criticizing the sheikh, the monarch, and the person next door happened to be a plainclothes police officer. And the next day, someone showed up at their door and carted them off. There were just enough stories of that to instill so much fear in immigrants because the UAE does not have freedom of speech. You are not allowed to say whatever you want to say. They're very clear on their rules. And if you violated those rules, even in private conversation, if you were any kind of dissenter or troublemaker, quote unquote, you would be deported. If you committed a crime, you would be deported. You wouldn't get due process. You wouldn't, be charged and have your day in court. If you were suspected of committing a crime, and that is still true, you can be deported. You will be deported, and you will lose your right to ever return to the country, whether you've lived there for a long time or not, whether you have family there or not, whether you have a job there or not. And that is basically what Trump is doing. I mean, that's not the only thing. So that's one thing, this kind of fear of.
And to summarize, it's so far the check marks of the parallels between UAE and Trump's would-be America, a fear of instant deportation and a kind of censorship of thought, right? So far, those are two check marks we can make. Fear of instant deportation for immigrants who step out of line, which he's already doing in a really dystopian sort of way. What else?
No birthright citizenship, right? So that's what Trump wants. Trump has already challenged, right out of the gate, he challenged birthright citizenship, and it's wending its way through courts right now. And that is what the UAE also has, zero birthright citizenship, because if they were to actually give citizenship to people who are born there, again, the Emiratis would be outnumbered. This is the system is based on ensuring Emirati supremacy, just as the system that Trump wants to institute in the United States is to ensure the supremacy of white Americans. And so, in fact, there's even less link, right? Because Emiratis can say, look, I can trace my ethnicity back to this country from time immemorial. White Americans can't say that about this country, but Trump wants to do that. So no birthright citizenship.
Yes, and let me just, before we go on from that, I think another important part of it is that the immigrant workforce in the UAE and in other so-called monarchies in that region and so on, is that because they have no right of citizenship, you have a workforce that is kept docile by the fear of arbitrary arrest and deportation. And what a great thing that is for the employer class, right? For the bosses.
Exactly. And so all of this is intimately tied to the economic system. There are no unions. Workers don't have any rights. In fact, in order to come to the United Arab Emirates, up until more recent years, and I can explain that because there's a parallel there as well, up until recent years, in order to come to the United Arab Emirates, without, if you didn't have any family there and you just wanted to emigrate there, you could only do it through a work visa. You had to have an employer sponsor you. And as soon as you lost your job, if you lost your job, your visa was revoked. And so people are tied to their jobs. There's no unionization. There's no free healthcare if you're not a citizen. You have to purchase health insurance if you're a citizen, if you're a non-citizen rather, which is the majority of people. And so, yes, it creates this docile workforce. And there are, work camps in Dubai that are out of sight of the tourists and the pretty pictures that you see in the Fly Emirates ads. And so this docile workforce, my uncle, my mother's brother, was a menial worker for an American company. And when he got injured on the job, they didn't give him workers' comp. They didn't give him even the chance to pay for his own recovery and help him recover. They simply fired him. He had to leave. And it was only because my mother intervened. So there's a lot of who in Dubai, right? And this is Trump's America as well. And he's doing this with tariffs. He's creating a lot of corruption in the system because it benefits people like him. If you know the right person, if you're well connected, you can skirt the laws. The laws don't apply to you. They don't apply to the rest of us, which is how it works in the United Arab Emirates.
Right.
And another thing that is the most, I think, the thing that clicked the light bulb in my head when I was looking at the Trump administration in just the first few months and where I was born and raised and what I sort of escaped was when Trump immediately in February began talking about an alternative to the green card that he called the gold card. So people know the green card is if you have legal U.S. residency, alien resident. For example, Mahmoud Khalil, who's been deported, had a green card. For years, I had a green card. and that through marrying a spouse, you can get a green card through various legal pathways of entry. Trump's idea is to have a gold card, which replaces I believe it's the E-1B visa, the investor's visa. It either replaces it or it sort of complements it, which means that in the United States, if you have enough money to invest in the US economy, you could get a visa. Trump has kind of pushed that to the limit and created this idea of the gold card. It's got very little media coverage, but basically, if you pay $5 million to the US Commerce Department, right? Not immigration, you can get a gold card visa, which is basically what the United Arab Emirates has now done. They call it the golden visa. The golden visa in the UAE is a way to say, we want just the really rich immigrants to come to the UAE to invest their money and to stay. Those are the desirable immigrants. They have all these perks that include, only every 5 years they have to renew it. They're not connected to an employer. They don't have to be working. As long as they have the money, they can stay. And it's like, it was almost as though Trump got this idea from the UAE. There are other countries that have it too. So he got it from somewhere. And in 1 week or something like that, 1,000 people bought these $5 million gold cards, raising $1 billion, $5 billion it was in one day. Forbes.com reported it in one single day. The Trump administration basically sold $5 million entry to the United States. So there's all this hubbub about immigrants and how we, need to do something about immigration. But if you have $5 million, you can come into the United States. So it's not to say that a gold card is a bad thing necessarily, but in tandem with what Trump is doing, which is to cut off other legal pathways, essentially what he's doing is creating a system saying only wealthy immigrants allowed and not other immigrants.
And he's in effect rebalancing the already precarious sort of class factionalism in this country by trying to bring in wealthier people, exclude working class people, shift the balance of power to the owner class. I mean, we could go on, but basically he's trying to replicate not just the UAE, but other type economies of this type as well. So yes, exactly. Have we left anything out? Have we talked about every dimension of this? It's obviously a sort of a multi-tiered system in the Middle East. In the UAE, it's
well, one of the things that the UAE doesn't have and hasn't had for a very long time are income taxes. That's a thing that the Trump administration wants to get rid of, right? Because income taxes is a way of collecting money from everybody, putting it in a pot, and paying for things that we all benefit from. It's a collectivism. It is, it's the basis of a socialist system. The only way to pay for things that we all benefit from is to collect money from everybody. But if you have a system where you're not collecting money from everybody, then you don't owe everybody anything. You only owe those people who pay for it. So it's a pay-to-play system, which is effectively what the UAE has had for a long time. What's really interesting, by the way, is that the United Arab Emirates, the reason that for a long time they could do this was because they had money from oil sources, they had money from aid sources. The government was very rich, so the government could pay for things and bring immigrants in who contributed to the economy. Now they're realizing that when you have a housing association, when you have a neighborhood that the government has built, who is to pay for the upkeep of that neighborhood, to repair the sidewalks? And so you have fees that have cropped up little by little by little. Oh, if you buy a house in this neighborhood, you have to pay annual fees to that neighborhood, which pays for the upkeep, which is effectively a tax, right? So there are fees because every government eventually realizes, in order to financially sustain ourselves and to have things that we all rely on, roads, libraries, infrastructure, we do have to tax each other. So it's interesting that the UAE is sort of kind of coming around to, and they also have now instituted sales taxes, which they didn't have for a long time. But that was a big attraction for people to go to the UAE. Oh, there's no income taxes. You can save money and send it back home. That's why my one big reason my parents went there. But what that means is that you have a system, again, pay to play. You get social hierarchies that are also kind of racially based. So in the UAE, you've got the Emiratis at the top, then you've got all the white immigrants, Americans, British, Australians. Then you've got all the wealthy South Asians, so Indians. Then you have the poorer South Asians and other Asians, Indians, Pakistanis, Bangladeshis, Sri Lankans, a lot of Filipinos. I forgot Russians. There were Russians sort of come in. Russians have the skin privilege, but not the class privilege. So they kind of fall between the wealthy white immigrants and the wealthy South Asians. So there's the stratification, which is again becoming, what we've had that in the United States, but we had been trying to move away from it. And Trump wants to restore that social stratification. So getting rid of income taxes, tariffs, he says, is going to pay for it all, which it won't.
Right.
And then suddenly over time, there'll be, you need an ambulance, you got to pay for the ambulance because we don't have income taxes anymore. You want schooling, you have to pay for a private school because we've gotten rid of public education, right? They're chipping away at our public infrastructure and the tax system in order to create a private pay to play system that the richer you are, the more access you have to things, and the rest of us just fall to the become compliant workers in the machinery for billionaires.
And forcibly compliant workers. We had a foretaste of this a few years ago in the San Diego fire, where people were shocked to learn that some wealthier folks' homes got immediate firefighting service because their insurer, AIG, had made an arrangement where if you buy that insurance, you get like concierge firefighting services. And of course, in healthcare, we have concierge medicine. So it's already, been creeping into the United States. I was thinking as you were talking, Sonali, about, I don't know if you've seen it, there's an excellent documentary called The Workers' Cup about working immigrants in Qatar and them coming together to have a kind of World Cup competition among themselves in football and soccer. And it's a great glimpse into this underlife that people are forced to live in under this multi-tiered system. But of course, while it's a great movie, it's a terrible existence. And that's the whole point. And they're living in dormitories, and they're substandard, and they're separated from their families and all that. It's extremely dystopian future. And I guess maybe we should close by saying your idea that that Trump might be taking some of this consciously or subconsciously as a model, I don't find far-fetched at all, because as we say, it's pervasive in the so-called kingdoms of the Middle East, where Trump does a lot of business.
Exactly. And, Trump wants to be a king, right? This system only works in a monarchy where there's unaccountable power. He's talking about a third term. There's no checks and balances basically left on him. He's doing everything by executive power and fiat. He's breaking the law first and saying, oops. And then the Supreme Court, which is basically rubber stamping his decisions, is allowing him to do what he wants. So in order for the system that he is aiming for, that he's aspiring for to work, you need a monarchy, you need a strong man, you need an authoritarian ruler, which is what he wants. And so if the UAE is indeed the future of the United States, and I should say use the word future because it's really the most aggressive, backward, feudalistic system, then immigrants like me are really wondering, like, what was it that we escaped? I, as a 16-year-old, came to the United States. I remember telling my parents, I want the free. I don't like living in a place where there's no freedom of speech. I know that America is flawed, but I want to come to America because I believe in the freedom of speech. I want to be able to say what I want to say. I was a young idealistic teenager.
Right.
And now we have already been told that Mahmoud Khalil's freedom of speech means nothing, because what he was talking about went against US foreign policy interests.
Right. And
And so,
as a 16-year-old, I believed in I had freedom of speech too. And, if Harvard doesn't have freedom of speech, if law firms don't have freedom of speech, this is not, I mean, people think it's quote unquote just about immigrants being denied their freedom of speech, as if that weren't totally contrary to everything this country claims to believe in. But it's a lot of native born Americans are equally finding their freedom of speech being suppressed if they're, let's say, Palestinian studies professors, or if they're history professors, or if they want to teach the history of a woman's social position in this country to high school students who need to know that. They don't have freedom. They're taking away their freedom of speech too. So it's an extremely, I think, extremely important and timely point. And in these countries, there are only a few royals.
yeah,
Everybody
exactly.
else, everybody
And
else, royally
there was
screwed. But
there were so many other parallels, like there's no like sexual freedom, right? There's no LGBTQ rights are not a thing. In fact, there's a rampant systemic homophobia and transphobia in the UAE as well. It is Trump's future is the UAE's past and current. The UAE has not changed very much at all over the years. If anything, it's sort of become more aggressive in certain ways. And I have to tell you, like for years and years and years, even though I didn't live in the UAE, my family encouraged me to not speak out against the UAE because I might want to visit them. Like, think about the
oh,
fears.
I know.
Even living outside the UAE, I've been warned to not speak out against it because of being able to basically being held accountable, like, oh, they might not let you in to come and visit us if they know you've been speaking out against the monarchy. It's terrible. And this is what is in the US. I was just outside the country for spring break, coming home from Mexico City, and a little part of me was wondering, should I be deleting my Facebook apps on my phone? Because when I come in and go through immigration, even though I'm a naturalized US citizen, are they going to look at my social media? And luckily the person we got, like, it was very smooth, but that fear was in me, right? And that's what they need. They don't actually need to enforce all of these things all the time. They just need enough fear that we'll censor ourselves. And
Right, absolutely. And just in the interest of equal time, I will point out that I was afraid for many years of speaking out fully about Israel, because I would like to visit someday. Israel and Palestine both very much want to. And I did not want to foreclose that opportunity. Now, of course, they're also banning people right and left. And meanwhile, here at home,
they're banning Jews. They're banning Jews who are
absolutely
speaking
banning
out
Jews.
against Israel.
I just wrote a piece about that. They're banning Jews because of the kind of Judaism they practice, which calls on these Jews to condemn genocide. Absolutely, but now we can have our own homegrown monarch, and Mr. Trump, and I'm sure he's preparing Jared Kushner to be his Mohammed bin Salman.
Yep. That's
So,
there you go.
yeah, I'm glad you brought this to our attention. It's a great point, and I hope you expand on it at some point.
Yeah, I'm going to try to write about it. Thank you so much.
We depend on your support here at the 0 Hour, so please give whatever you can at any of the links you see on your screen. Thanks so much.